Welcome everyone. We still have space in the front if you're looking for space. Thanks for joining this talk. I'm very overwhelmed that so many people are here. Thinking that this is actually like a shorter talk. So let me think how to introduce this talk. So first I have to give a warning. This is a talk without any code. Which I usually don't do, right? Usually I talk about code and testing and architecture and whatever. There's no code on a single slide, so also something that I usually don't do. Also a bit of a disclaimer, this is my point of how I see what the changes we did at SoundCloud. This is not like the official way you're supposed to do. This is probably something where we can have a lot of discussion. So I gave this talk in Paris. And the reason I want to repeat it, because we had amazing discussions with folks after this. From, we have exactly these problems, until, oh yeah, we are moving this direction, and you get a recording of this talk, until oh, I don't agree. But this is exactly what you want to write, right? Let's open a discussion after this, and I hope because we probably have 10 minutes afterwards, let's all come together, and I want to hear your points. And as I said, this is my point of view, and actually, some of my team are here, and they haven't seen this talk. So I'm very curious what they think, if this is the way I see that how we change things, if they would agree with us, with me. Cool, what is this about? So I joined SoundCloud 4 years ago, and we had a different model when I joined. And now a few years later, so we basically moved into the direction of feature teams by then. And actually, interestingly, I was talking earlier today to some people who left SoundCloud long before I joined, and they told me about the things that they tried back then. So, you know, the industry is sometimes like a pendulum, and maybe we are on the way of let's reverting some ideas that we had. So now we don't have feature teams anymore, and this is a bit the story of a little recap of the whole thing. So thinking of feature teams, this doesn't work. Let's talk about the Agile Manifesto, because a lot of the things how we work nowadays coming from the Agile Manifesto, right? So let's look at it maybe one more time. It was all about that individuals and interactions. We should more value than processes and tools. It's all about writing working software, right, or not documentation. Directly customer collaboration, talk to each other instead of negotiating contracts. And responding to change, right? All the things that how we work nowadays, if it's Scrum versus Kanban, it's let's be able to prioritize our work and to respond to change. So what about cross-functional feature teams and how they related? So I looked at Wikipedia and what the definition of them. So a cross-functional feature team, also known as a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary team, is a group of people with different functional expertise, working towards a common goal. The way we use it in software is mostly like backend and front-end developers working together, right? And the way most of us, if you're Android or iOS developer, work, came, what I would think, from some blog posts and some videos that Spotify published a couple of years ago. 2014, 15, some people called this Spotify Agile model, I wasn't aware. But they showed how they structured their team and how they created these cross-functional feature teams to be more successful. And to be honest, everybody, including us, kind of followed this model. So what was their idea? So they said, this is the classic approach, how a lot of some companies, including Spotify at the beginning, used to work. You have a problem like, we need to cross this river, and the management said, please build a bridge. So you're very highly aligned because you were told what to do and what's the goal, but there's no autonomy for the team. Just build that bridge, right? And what the team at Spotify saw, there's a better way of doing it. Give the team the problem. We need to cross that river. Figure out how. So try to give them high alignment. They know where they want to go, but you give them the autonomy. Let them figure out. Give them a problem statement, right? I mean, this is something that all of us should do all the time, thinking about the why, what's the ticket even supposed to do, right? So then most companies set up their team, taking backend developers, taking Android, iOS engineers, right, into one team, gave them everything that they need to succeed, so that they stop being blocked by other teams. This is the whole idea of it. And when I joined SoundCloud, I was very lucky to join one team that had the perfect setup. So the growth team by then had an engineering manager. We had a product owner. We had a designer. We had a data scientist. We had 2 Android engineers, 2 iOS engineers, 2 backend engineers. We didn't have front end, but for that team we didn't need it. So we had this perfect setup, how ideally all the other teams also should be set up so that we can succeed. But to be honest, especially looking back, the reality was a bit different. Some teams had only 1 Android engineer. They had no Android engineer. Maybe they had no mobile engineer. There was always something missing. So a lot of these teams were always understaffed. So you created a feature team, and then you need to hire like 8 more people just to fill this team, right? So this became like a constant struggle for a lot of these teams. And from an engineer perspective, this was, I just want to pair with someone. This is something that I heard a lot. And when I started, I spent the first 2 weeks pairing with like nearly everybody from the team, like from the Android team. And I really liked this, getting to know, get the code base, the people. I think for the next 2 years, this was the last time I paired with anyone from the team. Because the problem was, all of these teams had their own goals. They all worked on different things. And just saying to my manager, oh, can I pair with this other team for a day? Was like, but wait, you have something to do in our team, right? So this was a problem. And this led for us as Android engineers to a problem of knowledge sharing. So how do I learn in the Android way, right? And this is something that the Spotify idea recognized, and there's a solution. There's a chapters and tribes in their way of thinking. And this is also something we adapted. For us, it was called the Android Collective. So this was all the Android developers, independent of which team they're in. And we would come together once a week, for example, to sync. What are we working on? What's new in Android, right? To have a knowledge sharing. We had retrospective, but over the years, attendance got lower because you also had a retrospective in the other team, right? That's just another meeting. Which was also the problem with additional meetings. You want to schedule something with the whole team. This is like super hard because you need to align between 5, 6 teams, right? How do you code reviews? I mean, you don't have the context, right? If you meet once per week, how do you know what some other team is working about? But you have to review their code. And there still was the problem, I just want to pair with someone. It still wasn't solved. And thinking about these code reviews, just recently Alan was posting this. He just mentioned again how bad actually pull requests, like code reviews after the code, are in terms of their development. So he said they're the burden, they're very often like way of a non-dysfunctional way of working. They're destructive, he said. I mean, most of us doing them, right? We do them, but code reviews via a pull request is the worst way of doing code review. It's better than none, but it's still the worst way. The best way is we're together, code it as a team. Then you get immediately feedback, or not like 1 week after you did the whole thing, right? So something, but it wasn't possible with the way we set things up. But we saw more problems. We created kind of new silos. The whole idea of these feature teams was to break up the silo, the Android silo, the iOS silo. But now we have new silos, different ones, which led to that kind of like all teams built their own thing. I remember when, for example, in the search team, all of a sudden, hey, we did this in MVI. It's like, wait, where's MVI coming from, right? Was super cool. They did a really good job, but we had one architecture, and we were moving to MVVM. And like, okay, now we have MVI for this feature. And this is actually very natural. There is actually a definition of those. It's called Conway's Law. If an organization is large enough, you will find the structure of your organization inside your code. And these feature teams, you set them up by feature, right? There's, for example, a search. There's maybe a discovery, whatever, how you split this. But this code, you will see it will evolve because there's an ownership of this team, and this will look different than the rest of the code, right? So you find your project structure in the software, and if your company is old enough, you will find the history of all your structures in the code. So yeah, the new silos was a problem. Which is another thing that you have with the silos. Who's actually working on this bigger problem? So this whole change that I'm describing started with the iOS team. And I think after 13 years or 14 years of their code base, they just last year, for the first time, have the next up queue that you see which songs are playing next. I think Android did like a long time ago, but no one ever did it because no one had time to build this larger feature. And think about an even larger one, right? Like your IU redesign or something. You have a problem. You have to extract people from these feature teams or scale up a team all of a sudden. And this thing is that Spotify in the original model, they warned of this. So when you rewatch this video, they showed this. They said, be careful. You might have into a position where, wait, I hope someone is working at that river problem. Or you might end up in a low alignment thing because all the teams, they're doing their thing and they're focusing on their problem domain. And maybe the company want to go this way, but everybody is so busy doing their thing. And I called this, I just made this term up, a trickle-down KPIs. That's something I saw. So the company, by the beginning of the year, defines this is where we want to end up, right? This is the number that we want to drive. Like, I don't know, for us, like listening time or something, subscribers. And then all these teams think out, okay, what can we do in our extra part to achieve this? And hopefully, the sum of all these things will match what the company want to do, right? But my experience, similar to trickle-down economy, this will not work. This will not sum up. And while I was working on this talk, I found this blog post by someone who worked at Facebook. Then when Instagram was a cool thing, he joined Instagram and saw like how everybody was so much better there. And then Instagram became Facebook. And now when he left, he also had a bit of retrospective, like, wait, what happened here? And he had a similar thing. He said this, at Facebook, the leadership would come up with a goal matrix, some very important numbers that loosely mapped to the current business goals. If these metrics moved in the right direction, and it meant that you shipped, the work you shipped made the product better. And the larger the company, I mean, you name them, right, the big ones, work like this. If you move that KPI of your team, you shipped a better product. And when we look at some of these apps, look at the Amazon apps, right? It doesn't feel like a good product. But the KPIs often work, right? Add like the third buy button there and people will buy more. Solved, right? So somehow our industry started to work like this. And for us as developer, we have a similar problem. So this is the company KPIs, but they're also tech KPIs. Crashes, right? These kind of things that we as developer need to take care of. And when I got offered 1.5 years ago the role of like the Android lead, I was like kind of interviewing the previous leads, what they think about the role, and they said, one of them said, yeah, the role is a bit tough because you basically are a technical dev PM. And I would add, I'm a technical dev PM without a team. We basically had to go to teams, oh, I need one of your developer for 20% of the time, the next 3 months, and from you as well, and try to align this all to fix these crashes, because none of these teams own the crashes, right? This is not part of their KPIs. Interestingly, our current CPO lately said something like this, and I wanted to quote him, because normally someone from a product org doesn't say these kind of things. He said speed and performance, how fast an app loads, and how little it crashes, are the most important consideration for any product. I found this very interesting, because usually in the way we design features, no one asks if this. Get it out, next one. And maybe iterate on a feature, right? But of course, in the Spotify model, they thought about this too. They said, oh yeah, you need like a client app squad next to the feature squad. And probably also an infrastructure squad. Which led to the way most of us interpret it is, you need a core team. So maybe a bit less autonomy to the individual teams, but have one team, for example, who defines the architecture, the way things are supposed to be. A bit like libraries for the other teams, right? To solve this. But what I've seen a lot, the core team became the tech dev team. So all the problems the other teams wrote, core team will fix it later. They can move fast. So these are the things that we observed. And then it wasn't us changing things, but the iOS team was in such a bad shape that they said, we have to change something. And we did. But the first question is that you could ask, did we do something wrong, right? We misunderstood the way Spotify wanted to work. So for this talk, I asked myself this question, right? Was there like a wrong path that we took? So I Googled a bit and found some nice papers. According to this Harvard Business Review that I found, 75% of cross-functional feature teams are dysfunctional. That's a lot. So it's like, agile. All of us are agile now, no? But I would say probably 75% are not very agile. So I worked in a very company and they did Scrum by the book. I had like probably more Scrum Masters per team than developers. But they were the most non-agile company I ever worked for. And I think we all know examples like this. So maybe we did something wrong by adopting this idea. And while looking into this topic, I found an interesting coincidence because basically nearly when the Spotify blog came, there was another one. There was a blog post in 2013 from Netflix telling how they work. And microservices became a thing afterwards. Because all these teams have all their microservices. That was amazing, right? Nowadays, a couple of years later, we read a lot of something like, is your application large enough to be broken down to microservices? So microservices are still there. They still have a purpose. But a lot of companies went fully this path, right? And maybe it was early, maybe it was wrong at all. So what was the idea of microservices? Independent deliverables. You can publish your service, right, without asking anyone else. You have full control. Like your feature team, you have full control of what you're doing. And actually, they work often, they come together. Your feature teams owns your microservices because that's the one that you have full control of. So the more feature teams, probably the more services you end up having. What was the problem of it's called the fall of microservices? Your complexity increased. Now you have a lot of boxes out there. And some companies, you just distributed the mess, right? Because you had a mess in the first place, instead of fixing the mess, trying to spread it all over the place. So what all these microservices blogs say nowadays, don't choose a pattern or an architecture pattern just because it works for someone else. And I would strengthen this part, especially if it's something from Netflix, Google, Amazon, or Spotify. Or you can add a few others here. They have problems on a scale that most of us will never have. I remember working for a company, and someone from Facebook came in and said, we have to do mono repositories. It will solve all our problems. So we threw all the code bases into one repository. The build times went to the roof. Developer happiness went to the basement. But hey, we had mono repos now. They just didn't understand the problem and what they want to solve. They actually wanted to have less engineers managing these repositories. They didn't understand us. If Facebook does it and they have problems build times, they just hire 20 more engineers. But they wanted to get rid of these engineers. So they just did the wrong reason. There's nothing wrong with mono repos in it itself. And when you look at the cross-functional feature teams, I asked Google Bard what it knows about feature teams. And it says it came from a book called Large-Scale Scrum. And that large scale is the thing. And the same for Spotify. The idea was, okay, we reach such a scale that we need to reorganize ourselves. The question is, do you have this problem? So I tried to, for this talk, figure out how many Android engineers have Spotify. And interestingly, I asked people from Spotify, and I got very different numbers. But it's at least 120. So it's 100 Android engineers working on one app. Right now, I think that our team is 8. And I talked to people after my talk in Paris saying, hey, we have 4 Android engineers, and our company wants to move to feature teams now. Wait, what? Only split like 4 engineers, right? So think about, are you on the scale? It's the same problem as we just talked about microservices. And then there's another thing, when you think about the way cross-functional teams are supposed to work. It's like the idea of the full-stack engineer. So there's this really successful agile teams consist of individuals who have a deep expertise in one area, but a very broad general knowledge. T-shaped people. Oh, there's like the IT and even the E ones. And cross-functional feature teams work really well if you have a lot of T-shaped engineers. But I remember, like, I was pairing with my iOS engineer all the time, and it was fun seeing Swift code, and I remember like voting some Kotlin blog posts of some Swift features. But if he would go to holiday, could I have replaced him and fixed a bug? No. And not after 1.5 years. So I think it would have been different if I don't know, I could imagine if we all do React, and the app is React native, right? then everybody can jump in, the back end, the front end. But it's not the setup we had. We had good engineers, and they love doing Android. So what happened? So the return of the platform team, I could call. So how are we working now? And this transition isn't finished. It's never finished, right? But let me show you where we are. So we went all back to one bucket. We have a collective code ownership of the app. We are now much more able to do mobbings and pairings. Hey, there's a problem. There's an A&R. Want to mob? Let's put something in the calendar, and then whoever wants to join, joins. No one forbids you to join, because we are one team. If there's something larger, like for example, maybe you saw the feed experiment we were running, we can still create like a temporary feature teams for something that takes longer. But in theory, you should avoid this, because like temporary feature teams also have a bit of an owner problem. What about these silos, right? So we broke up the feature team silos and went back to the original silos. Yeah, but I think we broke down more silos than we created. Also, when you think about this idea of breaking silos with the Azure Manifest, it was these old-style tech companies where you would develop for something for half a year, and then you throw it over the fence to the QA department, and 3 months later they will come back with the report. We never worked like this. Actually, until today, we still never had QA. So it was like a problem that wasn't as large as for other companies. Also, one thing that our product now tries to do, don't write these large tickets where everything is defined, and at some point, the developer picks it up. Here was the idea, and then when the developer, when it's like shortly before, when we start working on it, let's have a conversation together. Let's take the designer and the developer and walk through all these cases, right? Do it together, because the thing that we had in the feature teams was that the designer was sitting with you. He was always there for you, right? We have to replace it with something. So there needs to be a bit more conversation, but this is the way we're trying to work. I would like to go back to the original Wikipedia definition I showed you. So there was a second part of this. So this was the one I showed you, right? It says it may include people from finance, marketing, HR, so typical people from other side of the organization. This is not how we, as tech people, defined cross-functional feature teams. So one thing that we did now is we have regular things, and we're still trying to find the right cadence, where people from marketing sit on a call. They are part of the prioritization of the next work. In the past, it was like marketing would never marketing anything that we built, and they would probably wonder what we're doing all day. Because we never talked to each other. The marketing people were never in the same room with the product owner and the developer. We're changing this. And in these meetings, we continue to try to reprioritize work. Right now, we have these are the next 5 things we want to work on. And together, we define this list. And then developers also know what are the next 5 things we work on. As I said, we are still figuring it out, but this is the way we are working. Our silo, as an Android silo, we send newsletters every second week to the company. Hey, this is what we did this week. This is what's coming next. These are the cool things that happen. We are going to this conference. Why should we hide it, right? Tell us, everyone. I think because the important thing is, this comes from this Instagram blog post. It's very important that you have a shared vision. Don't have the trigger-down KPI. Everybody should know where we want to go. And let's find together the way how we get there. The details still the developers will do. But let's have this shared vision together. And when you look at the original blog post, there's a lot of things that we kept. So for example, those feature teams, they had like release screens and feature toggles so that you continuously can ship. Of course, we ship this. This is the way we work. We ship like on a release screen right now every 2 weeks. We used to have 1 week and want to go back to 1 week at some point. And there's stuff shipped all the time. The release gets automatic. No one can delay this. So we have feature toggles. So we still adapted the good things from this. And in the end, it's very important to have people who care, right? People who will want to look into A&Rs, into bugs. These are the ones that you want. And the most important thing, if you're not Google, if you're not Facebook, Spotify, you might not need it. The microservices, the basals, the mono repos, the modularization. How many of us have a completely broken modularization strategy because at some point we needed to create modules and more modules? And maybe cross-functional feature teams. Maybe you don't need it. It's not like they don't have a place. They have a place. But the question is, where is this scaling problem, right? I would say it's definitely not below 10. Maybe it's not even below 20. But if you have the 80s, the 100, of course you need to have a different setup. So, but most of us will not have this. So let's think about the Agile Manifesto. Keep these things in mind and work like this. For this talk, I want to print some stickers, but I got sick last week, so I just have to show it. Next time I'll bring those stickers. Just do shit. Stop talking about it. And as I said, we are still not there. We are still figuring things out, and I hope we have a lot of discussion after this, like where you are, which problems you have. Maybe you don't have these problems. And then hopefully, like in an hour, see you at a party where we have someone from SoundCloud DJing. Thank you.